Hey pedalers, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing another bike comparison, and the bikes that we're going to be comparing are the Pinarello Paris 105 road bike to the Defy Advance 2 made by Giant. So without further ado, let's get right into this bike comparison. Now this bike comparison was suggested by a viewer quite some time ago, so I can't find the comment, so I do apologize, but thank you for the suggestion. And I'll remind you guys that if you want to see a comparison of two bikes, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below, and if I don't get to it, just keep commenting it and eventually I will. So it really helps with me putting out content, and for everyone that's been supporting the channel by liking and subscribing, a big thank you. We're almost at 5,000 subscribers, but with enough talking, we're gonna get right into this bike comparison. So we're taking a look at the Pinarello Paris 105 road bike, retailing for $2,950 USD. It comes stock with a 105 group set, and this is a disc road bike. So I haven't seen this bike as of often. Pinarello isn't still that popular where I am in Canada, so it's always interesting when I get these suggestions that are of not common brands. But it comes in 2 or 3 different colors actually. So it comes in this nice black that I think is classic. You can never go wrong with this color scheme. The blue steel, I like it. It's not really a flashy blue, it's more of a darker blue, so I do like that color as well. And taking a look at the orange, not a fan of orange. So I really feel like dark colors really suit bikes. That's at least my personal preference. But anyways, we're going to be taking a look at the specs because that's what you guys love with these videos, is just seeing how far your money can go in terms of value. So just looking at the geometry, Pinarello does their interesting share of geometry flares. You can see on the down tube, it goes inward for the wheel. Looking at what comes stock on the bike, we have the cassette, which is 105, and I like it because I said in the previous video, I like when bike companies actually put the specs. Well, in this situation, this is RA Cycle, so on the I almost said Giant website, but on the Pinarello website, they don't give you actually all the specs. It's very weird. They don't. Some companies don't even show prices, so my apologies. This website that sells the Pinarello does a good job at showing what the specs are. The chain is a Shimano chain. Rotors 160 millimeters, so I'm assuming front and rear, which isn't bad. This is an endurance bike, so this is important to note that, because the bike that we're going to be comparing is the Defy Advance 2, which is an endurance bike. But then I'll give you guys my 2 cents of why maybe an endurance bike isn't the best option. I'll get into that. The wheels, front and rear, are Fulcrum racing wheels, so I'm pretty sure those are aluminum. Frame material, carbon, which we would assume at this price point. Fork is carbon as well. It'd be interesting to see if that's full carbon, if the aluminum, if the steerer is actually aluminum or not, but I'm pretty sure maybe it's full carbon. Seat post is carbon. That's one thing I always forget with these budget builds bikes in terms of value. They do come stock with a carbon seat post, which is nice to see. And then in terms of everything else is basically 105. So front derailleur, rear derailleur, shifters are all 105. And this is, I'm pretty sure, hydraulic from the looks of it. I don't see any cables. And then everything else in terms of stem, handlebar, and saddle is aluminum. So other than that, if we look at some different angles of the bike, it looks very nice. We'll look back at the black one. You know, different angles as well. You can see it looks very clean. I don't have any problems with the bike in terms of aesthetics, and it comes stock with 105 hydraulic, which for $2,950 is quite expensive. Kind of reminds me of the pricing that you see with the Specializes and the, not necessarily maybe Trek, maybe, but definitely Specialized in terms of the pricing, even though it's 105 in disc brake. So very interesting to see from Pinarello. This is the first time I've ever even talking about Pinarello on my channel. Now we're going to be comparing the Pinarello Paris 105 to the Defy Advance 2 made by Giant. So this is an endurance bike as well. The usual things that people always forget when they ask what's the difference between an endurance bike and, let's say, a race bike, is that just a little bit of the geometry is designed to be more aggressive with those race bikes. So a lot of the fork angle is where on an endurance bike the geometry is made for more comfort, more stability. Where if you were to corner on an endurance bike, it wouldn't be as responsive like a race bike, because the travel of the fork and the geometry of the frame is just a little bit different in terms of the wheelbase. Yeah. I don't want to get too much in the engineering and the schematics of bike frames, but it's just endurance bikes are just made to be more relaxed. But then again, that's not to say that you can't make a Defy or an endurance bike in general more aggressive. And let's be honest, guys, unless you're racing top tier level, you could still take a Defy on a group ride or a local crit or a local race and still be able to win on it. That's one thing I always promote on my channel. A lot of times people speak without personal experience. Until you actually race an endurance bike and a race bike and really see your performance in both, given the fact that, let's say, your performance is equal, I really think it's minute unless you're racing top tier where every second matters. So that's one thing I always find funny when I do these comparisons. A lot of people have their own 2 cents to put in, and that's always good because I like conversation, but a lot of the time, you know, you gotta speak from experience. So have you ever raced an endurance bike? Because if you have, you'd probably realize that it really comes down, unless you're at the top tier, like I said, it really comes down to the type of rider you are in terms of fitness, skill, knowledge, risk taking, all that stuff that really makes the bike perform the way you want it to. So rather if it's a race bike or an endurance bike, it really comes down to the rider. But enough with my 2 cents. We're taking a look at the Defy Advance 2. Carbon frame, fork, and seat post. Looks to have the cheaper crank set that we usually find on these value bikes. So it's the Shimano RS 510 5034. So that's a compact crank, which you usually see with endurance bikes because usually people are not racing. Now, I forgot to mention this on the Pinarello Paris, they actually put a compact crank as well, so a 5034, which is great to see because a lot of new riders really struggle uphill. So it's good to see that they put proper gear ratios on these bikes. But going back to the Defy Advance 2, other than the cheaper crank, which I just said, full 105 hydraulic, you can see that they put a 160mm on the front and a 140 on the back, which is usually common. The rear cassette is an 1134, which is great for climbing. Like I said, for an endurance bike, a lot of kilometers, a lot of climbing. Usually, you'd hope, depending on the area that you live in. And on the Pinarello, we have an 1128, which I'm not too sure why. I think an 1130 at least should be common, especially with endurance bikes, because usually if you're not really racing, you probably don't have the highest fitness. Now, I'm not saying that everyone that gets an endurance bike doesn't have high fitness. I'm just saying usually it's more for the leisure, more hobbyist cyclist that usually goes for an endurance bike, where a more serious cyclist usually goes for a more racy bike just in terms of performance. But then again, to each is their own. I'm not trying to give a blanket statement. If you ride an endurance bike and you are a racer, then all powers to you. But other than that, just taking a look at the rest of the stuff, this has Giant Defy technology, which just dampens the road vibrations at the rear, so it flexes nicely. Now, I'm going to say this every time someone asks me to make a Giant comparison. These come stock with the Giant PR2 disc wheel set, and I had these in the rim brake version, and they were absolutely terrible. 2 spokes broke on me. I tried to get them warranty through Giant Canada, where I'm from, and they basically wouldn't warranty it and just made me feel like I was just not a valued customer. So absolutely the worst experience I've ever had with warranty. So Giant, step up your warranty. Absolutely terrible rims if you can't get them warranty if something breaks on them. So I'm going to say that anytime someone asks me to do these comparisons, Giant just had the worst warranty I've ever experienced. It comes in terms of tires, a Giant Gavia Fondo 1 tubeless, 700 by 32 millimeters, so pretty wide tires, so they're going to be super comfortable. I forgot to say the tire size that came on the Pinarello, and the size is 25C. So I think the Pinarello's having a hard time knowing exactly what endurance means. Usually someone that's buying an endurance bike wants comfort, so having a better cassette, rear cassette, having a better tire width is going to be more comfortable. So the Giant Defy, like I said at the beginning, is 2,500 USD, where the Pinarello is 3,000 USD, and the only difference I can really see is the crank. So does the crank merit a $500 upgrade? I would say not, especially if you're looking for more endurance, just more, you know, on the weekend riding, or, you know, 2 or 3 times during the week. I think the crank isn't that important, especially if you most likely are going to get into training, perhaps upgrade to a power meter, one single sider or whatnot. I don't think having a 105 dedicated crank is the best upgrade. It's worth $500 because it definitely is. I'm pretty sure you can get the crank for $200, give or take. I'm not too sure about that. But in terms of the Defy, you're saving $500 right there. So now it brings me to my favorite part of the video, when I give you guys my 2 cents of real world experience. So usually people say, you know, I don't want a racy bike because I don't want my back to hurt, yada, yada. And I used to say, okay, that's fair. But you know what? Any bike you get, whether it's an endurance bike, aero bike, or all-around bike, if you don't have a proper bike fit, you're going to have, you know, pains and aches around your body. Now, I do agree a more aerodynamic bike usually puts the rider in a more uncomfortable position if they're not adjusted to it and get used to it. But I like to say that it's very minimal. Unless you're putting, you know, hundreds of kilometers every week, I think the most important thing is a bike fit, and that goes with any bike. So I used to tell people, you know, the Defy Advance 2, yes, it's an endurance bike, but it's 2,500 USD. And the comparison that I like to bring up, I would show them let's say a TCR Advance 2 Pro Compact retailing for $2,100 USD. So you're saving $400 USD. You're getting the 105 crank right here. So you're getting an upgrade in terms of the crank. And, you know, disc versus rim, I will say this, unless you're planning on doing some, you know, off-road, mixed terrain type stuff, or you live in a really wet climate, rim brakes are totally fine. They basically won the past 3 Grand Tours this year in 2020. So, you know, if the top level pros can descend at 100 kilometers on rim brakes, I'm pretty sure the normal person going 25, 27 kilometers an hour on their local rides should be fine. I know the industry loves to push disc, but the reality is, you know, you're more than fine on a rim brake bike. So you're saving $400, and usually you're getting a better upgrade in terms of having the full crank. Now, if we don't want to go with a Giant bike because of their terrible warranty, we can look at the Orbea Orca M30. I just covered this bike recently in my last video, and that's why I'm going to be talking about it pretty much going forward until you guys or if I can find a better value bike. But for $23.99, so $2,400, $100 cheaper than the Defy Advance 2, you're getting a disc brake bike with the 105 crank. So, you know, if I'm being honest, guys, I think bike fit is the thing that really determines how a bike feels. Unless you're slamming the stem and you have like the drop between saddle and stem super dramatic, you're going to be pretty much comfortable on any bike. I really do believe that. So right here we have a bike that's pretty much spec'd out the same, if not a better upgrade. You can see the cable integration here is not the best. We'll look at another angle right here. A lot of, you know, cables. Even if we look at the Pinarello here, I don't know if you can see that many pictures of it. Let's look here. Cable integration is terrible. If we look at the Orbea, you can see it's very clean at the front. All the cables are going through the cockpit and the stem and then going down the down tube. So it's a very nice looking bike. It comes also in this nice, you know, metallic black. So that's just one thing to always note. So if we're comparing the Pinarello Paris to the Defy Advance 2, I don't think the Pinarello really merits an upgrade of you know, $500. Then again, I'm not an engineer. I'm going to be comparing the stiffness to weight ratios between the Pinarello Carbon and the Defy Advance 2 Carbon. I think it's very negligible, and I always promote it's actually better to reduce the weight of yourself as the rider and increase your fitness, because I think that goes a lot further than really worrying about grams and pounds on bikes. So that's my 2 cents is it's always important. I think in the gist of it is the frame geometry decent for what I want to do? If yes, we move on to the next thing. How are the parts, how are the components? And then we move into other things like warranty, etc., etc. So I think that's how I usually plan and compare bikes. So in this situation, yes, the Pinarello has a better crank. So if you get the Defy Advance 2 and you upgrade the crank for, let's say, $200, you know, $2,700, and you can save $300 when compared to the Pinarello. I think that's well worth it. Especially probably what I would do is I would just leave the Shimano RS 510 crank and just put on a single-sided power meter and just call it a day. If I wanted to try to maximize my savings. Then again, usually people that are buying an endurance bike are not too keen on, you know, top performance because they're probably not racing, not doing a lot of fast group rides, and it's just more of a leisure thing. Now, yes, that's a blank statement. I'm not trying to say that applies to everyone. I'm just saying from my experience, if I would have to say 95% of people that I've seen buy endurance bikes, they're not too focused on, you know, performance. It's more for enjoyment. So I just think the Orbea M30 is just a cool bike in terms of value. Now I'm going to be obviously talking more about it, but for $2,400, you don't even see that with the Giant TCR Advance 2 Disc Pro Compact. So usually I was trying to say where in this situation you can actually save money for going for a TCR in a rim brake model because the rim brakes are cheaper and you still get the better crank. But even if you go for the TCR, which is like a racy all-around bike, you still are basically spec'd out the exact same that you would be on the Defy Advance 2. So it's just interesting how Orbea offers you know, a better spec in terms of having the upgrade on the 105, and I would say the geometry is pretty neutral unless you're really slamming the stuff and becoming aggressive in terms of pushing your saddle forward. Yada. I don't think it's the end of the world. I've ridden thousands of kilometers with different bikes in different positions, and I always like to promote the position is what makes, you know, the comfort, the enjoyment, until you actually have that experience, rather than just saying the frame geometry, which like I said at the beginning, it does play a role, but position is the most critical thing when it comes down to comfort. So other than that, I'd probably go in this situation with the Defy Advance 2 because just for price, for value, it is better than the Pinarello. I don't think it merits the $500 upgrade. The warranty with Giant, it is what it is. You guys know from my experience, terrible experience in terms of that. But, you know, the question is to compare these bikes. So in terms of value, I would have to give it to the Defy Advance 2 2021 by Giant. And that about wraps it up. So if you guys want to see more of these comparison videos, just smash the like button, comment down below what bikes you want me to compare next. And until the next one, keep on pedaling.